Growing up in South Africa, we have heard about Orania many times. Orania has been portrayed to us in many different ways, mostly negative. After the hit piece done by News 24 that I talked about in my previous video, I decided to go to Orania and find out for myself what it is like. What is the crime rate in Orania? And what is it compared to the rest of South Africa's crime rate? How is Orania? How are the people there? Is it just a bunch of racists who hate black people like the media like to portray it? Or what is the spirit of Orania? How do the people live in Orania? Thus I set off on the road with Renee to go and find out how it is in Orania, and specifically how much crime there is and what the crime rate is in Orania compared to the rest of the country.
As we drove 500 kilometers to Orania, we stopped in a small town for a quick coffee with old friends. It was so sad to see the strong vet and farmer so discouraged and weary. We couldn't seem to get past the topic of how bad things are in his town. He is not a person for complaining, but one can't blame him if you hear about the farm attacks, the slaughtering of livestock, robbery and arson. With heavy hearts we drove further, and after arriving in Orania, our hearts became lighter as we realized there is hope. The Afrikaner is always one step ahead, and we experienced a community who is friendly and positive about the future of our people. The contrast was so drastic and sweet. We expected to arrive at a big gate of a fenced-off town. Instead, we drove into the town and realized we arrived when we noticed how neat the town is and how welcoming the people are. The first eyesight was children playing barefoot outside. It hit me square in the face how at ease everybody is and the simple way of living they have.
When we arrived in Orania, we talked to Mr. Joost Strydom. He handles all Orania's relations with the media. We asked him what Orania's relations is with media internationally and nationally in South Africa.
We just spoke about it actually, journalists in Orania, 90% of them, I'll say 95 even, are people from international media houses, and they come with a certain perspective. There's a reason why people fly all the way from America or from Europe to come to a little dusty town in the Northern Cape. They come with a certain perception to begin with, and a lot of them come with something in mind that they actually want to enforce upon us, even though the experience may prove to them that is not the way Orania functions. When you work with media almost every weekend, international media, and they're just never favorable, and they always have the same old cliche apartheid stories, then you really don't want to go through a lot of trouble with them anymore. However, when somebody actually goes through the trouble of coming here, we do treat them all the same way, give them a objective view of Orania as far as we can, treat them with respect, and give them the opportunity to maybe change their minds if they had a certain idea in the back of their mind going.
Renee asked Joost about one of the most common stories being told about Orania by the media.
Then there is the perception that Orania developed as a reaction on apartheid ending. Do you have something to say about that, because you are now on the camera?
Yeah, it's actually terrible, and we earlier today we spoke about perceptions in general and how bad it is for Orania. That people have such extremist opinions or perceptions about Orania. Orania is not a reaction towards the end of apartheid. It was something that actually found its existence in terms of research and so on in the 70s already. When everything was still going great for white people in South Africa, they had all the power in the country almost, and then the founding fathers of Orania saw that this will not be eternal. Minority rule will not continue forever, and they saw things like using your own labor, not exploiting someone else for their labor, is very important if you want to have some political say in your own community. If you can't exploit someone for their labor and not expect them to take part in a political process. So yes, towards the 70s, 80s, there was already people speaking about the Orania idea, but it only came into action, say, the late 80s. And the physical buying Orania, that the physical part of the process, it was in the early 90s.
Okay. And then, how off a grid are you? How dependent are you on the government?
That depends. I think it's very diverse in Orania. There are some people that comes here and lives exactly the way they did in maybe a city or in Joburg or in the Western Cape or wherever. There's also a lot of people, and I say really a lot, people, the type of person that would move to Orania is the type of person that's already a bit self-sufficient and have that, that mindset. So you see a lot of people erecting their own solar panel systems and battery banks and setting up boreholes for water and so on. So the town as a whole is not independent in terms of energy, but a lot of individuals in Orania are, which makes a strong community. But what we do have with the town as a whole, all the public services, and I'm speaking about water, sanitation, the electricity, the infrastructure, the grid, in terms of that, not the creation of the electricity, and waste removal, building roads, servicing new developments. So that's all things we do ourselves.
We were obviously very intrigued by this beautiful town, so when we got the chance to talk to the president, Mr. Karel Boshoff, we immediately asked him about it and the concept of Orania.
Well, except for being crime-free to a very large extent. I mean, it's an absolute minimum of local incidents that we ever have. Except for being crime-free, it's a community. Yes. It's not just a bunch of individuals. It's a community living together, which in fact give you the let's say the material Orania, the physical Orania as a settlement. But the settlement of Orania is also supported by and carried by what we call the Orania movement, which is more than just the people living here. It's also a lot of people understanding what we are doing, supporting what we are doing, and in different ways giving momentum to what happens here. And all that, Orania the settlement, Orania the movement, are in a sense directed by what we call the Orania idea, which is nothing less than the idea that Afrikaners should have a piece of land which hopefully becomes more than the present Orania, a piece of land in which we could exercise self-determination, because that's what we need for the future.
What draws people to Orania?
When people feel safe, not only physically safe, of course also physically safe, but when they feel safe in terms of the culture and language and traditions and history and all that, if they feel respected, if they are fundamentally recognized for who they are, it's very easy to engage. It's second nature. In a sense, it's a double movement. Moving inwards is, in a sense, already moving outwards. Because when you have established your own security, it's the normal thing to reach out, especially in South Africa with a lot of poverty and joblessness and all kinds of things. We have mastered some of the trickiest problems regarding local economic development, which we are not at all keeping for ourselves. If we could help the broader African continent by engaging in terms of these sort of basic preconditions for successful development, nothing would make us happier than doing that. But on the basis of mutual recognition, of security, of having the opportunity to be who we are. That's all we need.
And then he said possibly one of the most important things about the Afrikaner minority here in South Africa.
That's very basic. If you are a minority, then you need to group together. It's unsafe and it's unsustainable to be a minority and spread yourself out everywhere. That doesn't make sense. It makes sense to consolidate. So we consolidate around Orania, we form a hinterland, and we are calling up new initiatives that could take place in an area where the impact is most. And this may end in our lifetime or maybe after in a small state for Afrikaners in this part of the country.
We came here to make a documentary about the crime in Orania, so we had to ask him about that.
It's crime-free because it's culturally I don't want to say homogeneous. To a certain extent it is homogeneous, but in a certain sense also not. In a certain sense there are so many different approaches as there are people. But okay, let's say it's culturally relatively homogeneous. People know each other.
Yes.
They are tuned into each other in a certain sense, and they share the same values, and they share the same space, and they know that the way you act today is the way you live tomorrow.
Yeah.
So well, and of course that absolutely fundamental building block of any successful community, families.
Yes.
Which are of course not unaffected in Orania. We are not unaffected by the breakdown of families, but we are less affected.
Yeah.
And we really try to look after our families and our children. That's how you end up with a positive culture of less crime, less problems of many kinds. It's not as if we don't have and will never have problems. But what we try to do is to tackle it in a proactive way,
Yeah.
to be more interested in community building than in solving social problems, than in solving social problems. Rather community building than solving social problems, and in that sense be on the forefront, be proactive, and engage people. That's part of Orania. If you move to Orania, you are met by a committee that is in a sense starting to integrate you into the community. You partake in an orientation course over 2 days, which explains a lot of what happens in Orania, but introduce you to other Oranians as well. And there are, in other words, formal and informal ways of integrating into a close-knit community. And that's the answer to it.
Okay.
Whenever a society is just a bunch of individuals, crime goes up.
Yes.
Whenever there are meaningful ties that bind people together, something like crime goes down.
Yes.
We then asked him, how does one become part of the Orania movement?
First thing, people start following you, Orania on Facebook or whatever. Then you could join the Orania movement as an organization for a membership fee, and you get newsletters and those kinds of things. At that stage, people often start visiting. If you want to move to Orania, there's an application form in which you essentially answer two broad questions. What are you going to make a living of? Even if it's the results of previous actions, you know, if you're a rentier, you could live on your capital. But do you have a job? Do you have a home? Are you sorted? That's one question. The other essential question is, do you support what we are doing?
It is actually quite simple to become part of the Orania movement. You just have to go into the website and you can follow all the steps there. Walking out of the offices of the Orania movement, we first experienced exactly what crime-free Orania means.
Renee just had an interview with Karel Bosel, the president of the Orania movement, and he actually were a bit late for an appointment with his wife. So he just left the building open. Everything is open. We're strangers here in Orania. They just left the building open. There's a lot of very valuable electronics and cameras in there. And it's just left open. So we're going now. We're leaving.
Just close the door, perhaps.
We'll just close the door here. But to give you an impression on how it is, we're just closing the door and now we're leaving. And there's no problem with that.
On the first night, we experienced a bit of what Orania is when we forgot to buy firewood for our braai and all the shops were already closed. We asked Joost what to do and he told us it's quite easy. You just go to the shop and then enter through a little wooden door at the back. You take what you need and then on the next day you can come and pay for what you took. As South Africans, this was completely foreign to us.
One of the things that really impressed me in Orania was the lack of the culture of materialism, a problem that is abundant in the culture of the modern Afrikaner. In Orania, a multimillionaire would live right next to someone who owns nothing, and you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference.
The two people's kids will go to the same school, and both of them work to secure the future of each other's children. This lack of materialism is really what the Afrikaner people need to focus on today.
Of course, you will never get rid of the social classes, but because the people here do all their manual labor themselves and do not depend on cheap labor like the rest of South Africa, the difference between classes are not as visible. We actually met dear people who moved to Orania primarily because of 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 11 to 12. But we exhort you, brethren, to do so more and more, to aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs and to work with your hands as we charged you, so that you may command the respect of outsiders and be dependent on nobody.
First thing I want to share with you guys, I don't know if you've seen Gallup's statistic they released the other day, where South Africa ranked the 4th most dangerous country in the world, safety perception. And they asked the people 3 questions. The first one was, how safe do you feel in your home? The second question was, how safe do you feel safe enough to walk at night in your area? And the other one is, do you trust the government systems or the other systems that are in place to defend you, to keep you safe? And we ranked the 4th worst in the world. The safety perception in South Africa is paired with the reality. South Africa is probably one of the most violent countries in the world. And if you take that question and you ask anyone in Orania, they will answer yes, yes, yes. We do feel safe in our houses. We do feel safe to walk around at night, and we trust the systems we have in place.
It is clear to us that the people move here primarily because of the safety in Orania compared to the rest of South Africa. We asked broadly how people ensure their safety here in Orania, and it touched us deeply how biblically the town was managed.
If you take the Old Testament, for example, where Moses gave the laws to the community, it was to organize a community to actually live better amongst one another. And we also have that. So it needs to be policed. What we do have is petty crime.
We pressed on and asked about violent crimes in Orania.
Violent crimes now, if you compare it to South Africa and what happens in the rest of the country, this is really petty stuff we are talking
Armed
about.
robbery.
Nothing like that.
Okay.
No murders, no violent protests even.
On that note, we had to ask about a case that is still today used as cannon fodder against Orania, the case of Poppy van der Merwe.
But Orania wasn't on trial, so we didn't really have our day in court to present the evidence of everything we did do. What we did do, we had a lot of systems in place, and the whole community was actively involved in this family. The churches were involved, doctors were involved, and the statistic, or what we have seen by being actively involved with this specific family, is that the abuse stopped actually while they were living in Orania. But there was a lot of pressure on the family to stop doing what they're doing, to other problems they had here as well.
It was clear to us that the little girl was safe while they lived in Orania because the community prevented any abuse to the children. We find the propaganda that wants to portray Orania as the perpetrator troubling.
I actually saw the other day a little boy and a girl going to the local bank here, the bank we have in Orania, with a little rucksack on their bicycles, and they were in front of me in the queue. And when they got in front, the little girl took off the rucksack and took out a little envelope with probably about 10,000 rand in it, and said, and they were probably about 6 or 7 years old. And she just asked, can you please deposit this? My mother sent us with this to deposit in their account. So there's a safety, a feeling of safety as well, and well-being we have here. How we police it, we have a surveillance system, cameras that cover everything. And then also a proactive manner where we, when someone applied to move to Orania, we do access their criminal records. We ask for permission and we access that to just assess the risk. That doesn't mean that someone who has a record and history and he paid his dues regarding that he's not allowed into Orania, but we assess the risk to the community of everyone that comes in.
Finally, we got the chance to speak to Mr. Dawie du Plessis, the head of the security services in Orania. So we jumped in and asked him about it. What are the most common incidents of crime here in Orania?
The most complaints that we have and we picked up is a lack of public order. People who are visiting restaurants with liquor licenses do have too much at times, and that's the highest incident.
So basically intoxication in public would be the worst that you have here.
If you look at it in figures, so that's the highest number of, if you can call it a crime.
Are there any violent crimes?
We don't have violent crimes in Orania.
No, none at all. How do you prevent these crimes from happening?
One of the things that we do to keep crime low is we actually acted on every incident that's been reported. We don't leave things to chance.
Orania's security services are actually on the verge of expanding. Renee talked to Mr. Du Plessis about it.
I am here with Mr. Du Plessis at OVD Orania Veiligheidsdienste or Orania Safety Services, and this caught my eye and he is quickly going to tell us what it is.
Thanks for being here with us in Orania. What you see here is a community safety center that we start building on the 8th of August, and it's an 18-month project, and we actually aim to complete it in 18 months. It's early 2019. It's a collaboration between the Orania community and AfriForum, and the cost of the project is budgeted at 12 million rand.
We talked about how they prevent crime from the inside of Orania, but how do they prevent crime from the outside?
The incidents are so low that it's at the bottom end of our statistics.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
Do you have cameras around the town?
We do.
To see if someone comes in during the night?
We do, yeah.
Okay, so if someone comes in, you have a 24-hour room where you monitor these cameras, and when someone comes in from the outside, you will immediately know about him.
We do.
We came to a conclusion. What is the crime rate of Orania?
The incidents that's been reported to the control room mostly. The highest item there in statistical figures is misappropriate behavior. And if I can give you a figure, the period, the 18 months before the 1st of 2018 was 9.85 cases per month.
So looking at Orania's crime rate, we can say it's basically 10 people getting drunk per month.
That's, you can say that, yeah. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So can I have these statistics? Can I use them in my documentary?
Sure you can. It's no secret.
Thank you very much. It's very significant to me that it's this easy to get the crime rate of Orania. This is the document right in front of me here. And News 24 didn't even bother to ask for it. They just assumed that what's being said about Orania was right-wing propaganda without even asking for the statistics. And this is how easy I got it, and now I can compare it to the rest of the countries. I came here to Orania to get the statistics on the crime here to answer one simple question. Is Orania crime-free? And the answer, to a very large extent, yes. Is it 100% crime-free? Of course not. There will always be something that you can call a crime, like people getting drunk and stray dogs walking around. Is the crime of Orania even comparable to the rest of South Africa's? Well, the answer to that would be no, because most of the crimes that will be documented by the Orania's safety services will not even be documented by the South